Here we are back again where we left off in the previous movie, where I described really how to save and load in your presets. And you can see, if you remember, our preset was called Test 1 and that's been loaded in. Now Photoshop does actually come with some presets of its own, and you'll also find them hidden away in this menu, and you may find them useful, and you may like to use a certain look across some of your images. Some of them really need some more adjustment. Anyway, let's have a look in the drop down menu here. You can see there's one on the list called Color Negative, and you can see what happens there. You may like that, and you may like that as a special effect for some of your images. And just for a moment, let me click OK, and you can see that's the preset and the curve applied, and this is nothing, and this is with the preset. And obviously you could take the opacity key and you could try and blend the two. It's not really working in this example. Just bear that in mind though, that you could blend the two images together. And you could also change the blend mode for the layer by choosing an option from this list here. Now I'm not really going to go into blend modes in this movie, because we'll look at blend modes in a future movie, but just to show you that changing the various blend modes, you can get all sorts of weird and wonderful special effects going on. As I say, more of that in a future movie. So let's go back into the curves now by double clicking here and just show you some more of those presets. Cross process is a very popular look, particularly with portrait type images, and it's a look that I really like. It doesn't have to be restricted to portraits, you can use it on any image. And cross processing, as most people will know, or maybe not, it comes from the darkroom, where we use basically the wrong chemicals to produce to process a piece of color film, as opposed to using the correct processing chemicals. More about that again in a future movie, but just know that this is a cross-processed look, which on the whole usually tended to use greens and blues. The greens are having a greeny tinge in the highlights and more of a bluey tinge in the shadows. I mean, it's debatable, and everybody that talks about cross-processing will probably have a slightly different opinion, but at the end of the day, it's a look that I do like, although I don't like this particular way of delivering that look in Photoshop. I think it's a pretty poor attempt at creating cross-processing, and again I'll show you how I would do that maybe in a future movie. So that's cross-processing. This just gives us a slightly darker look, and you can see exactly what's happened there. It's just left the curve as it was, taken the middle slider, or taken a point in the middle, and just dragged down to make the whole image slightly darker. And that was that one. And increased contrast, so you can see there's the beginnings of an S curve here. Now, as you'll know with the previous movies you've been looking at, you should be able to do that for yourself by now. There's a lighter, and you can see that the point's just been dragged up and to the left there to make the whole image light and unfortunately flat. Linear contrast is just a very slight little tweak on an S curve. A greater S curve would obviously look something more like this. So that was your linear. Medium contrast is just a slightly heavier S curve there. Negative does something very interesting. Basically it takes these endpoints from where they were and switches them round back to front. So you drag this one down here, push this one up here, and you've got your negative. And there are much easier ways to do that, by the way, but that's what that is, the negative. And a strong contrast there, a strong S curve, and you can see at the bottom there's our one we created earlier and loaded in. So they're the presets that come loaded in with Photoshop, but don't forget you can make as many of your own presets once you've had a fiddle around with this curve. You can always click in here and save that preset away, and at any future time you can load the preset back in. Now then, there is this item which reads show clipping, and what that basically does is shows you anywhere on the image that's going to be clipped out in whites or blacks. This basically, as you can see just now, it's means we can do the same thing as we did with holding down the Alt key. I come from the days when we didn't have this function here, so I'm used to holding down the Alt key, but that's what that is. It shows you where the clipping is, much like we do with the Alt key there. So that's what that's all about. There are more options and more to say about curves, but for everyday use there's nothing more that we really need to say. Maybe in future movies if I think of something else. I mean, we don't really need to talk about what's hidden away in there, and I never go in there myself anyway. We can create custom points on the curve. Let me just show you that. If I alt click to reset and we get this drawing tool, we can certainly do all sorts of weird and wonderful things with the pencil by drawing a really weird and wacky curve there. And if you have a look around the internet, I'm sure you'll find lots more interesting things you can do to create your own specialized type curves. If I remember rightly, and I haven't done this for quite some time, but there is a curve that you can draw this way, which will give you a solarized look. Now it doesn't really suit this image, but it will give a very solarized look to a particular image that will suit it. And that was just drawing these two straight lines with the pencil tool there. So there probably is more things I could say about the curves palette, but we've certainly said enough up to now, and certainly given you the most important information that you need to be able to use the curves confidently to give yourself a much smoother tonal transition between your levels and contrast that you will get using the levels palette. So I would highly recommend curves, and as you'll see in future movies, we'll be using curves for not only adjusting contrast but also colour, and for some very specific colour correction. So it's as well you get used to looking at the palette and being comfortable with it now in these sort of early tutorial movies.